Okay, I want to watch this. The disturbing and vile anime fans Iceberg. If it's not good, I won't finish it, but it looked interesting. The thumbnail caught my eye. It was like a Raiden Shogun cosplayer.
Typically refer to people who are overly obsessed with anime, manga, and just Japanese culture in general. Most of them live out their otaku lifestyle by going to conventions and buying body pillows, which doesn't hurt anybody.
Like me! Wait, that reminds me! I actually forgot to tell you. Wait, did I? I don't know. I found my body pillow cover that I bought in Japan. I don't have a pillow for it, but I found it. I thought it went missing in the other house. Great, what? I bought it because it's merch of a game that I liked. No other reason.
If you happen to smell them. But some otakus have become a little too
obsessed
to the point that they commit vile acts. And trust me, it gets crazy.
Our young generation is clearly lost.
Just
imagine for once that you're a pretty smart student who has so far lived a pretty ordinary life. One day in class, you just happen to find a book that just falls out of the sky. When you go to pick it up, you realize that it isn't Harry Potter, which you could have sold on Craigslist, but something else. A book that is able to the person whose name is written in it. Now imagine you're also a hidden genius psychopath who decides to use this book to cleanse the world of all criminals.
Okay, but didn't everyone have a kid at their school that like had a death note and they would actually write people's names in it? No, bro, there was a kid at my school like that. No, wait, really? Okay, well, I thought that maybe that was a thing because Tectone said that he was that kid. He had a death note.
People, you also build a small fan base of people who like what you're doing and call you Kira. That is the plot of Death Note, the second most popular anime ever. Light Yagami, aka Kira, plays the psychopathic dude on his murder spree while trying not to get caught. Now there are tons of people obsessed with this anime and Light Yagami. For some reason, people just really like the whole psychopath, genius type of character.
It's just a good show.
6 p.m. on September 28, 2007, two hikers find a human body and 2 legs in a park in Belgium. There's nothing else on the body, no personal items or anything that would identify him or the killers. But 2 notes were found nearby with the message.
This cannot be real. Watashi wa Kira desu. This is real? Okay, I started to be like, maybe this video is like a satire or something and 40 minutes is too long for a satire. This is real? Well, we'll just keep watching.
Saying Watashi wa Kira desu, which roughly translates to I am Kira. Shit's crazy. A real dead person next to a Death Note reference. That was not the only mention of anime or Japan though. Once the police arrived, they also discovered a trail left by the killers in the form of a 160-foot line of rice that led to a symbol that is supposed to be something in Japanese. Not sure what that's supposed to mean though, I can't lie. Now the police had no proper leads at all. The detectives concluded that the body was either a few days old when found, or had been stored in some sort of freezer. The thighs and his sack were cut with almost surgical precision, and the only thing that they could identify was the fact that it was a Caucasian guy between 20 and 30 years old. There was no missing person matching that description, and the only witness was some jogger who said that she saw some blonde man lying down in the area where the body was discovered. This broke the media, and so there were a lot of speculations that the police was just throwing around, such as it being a prank by medical students because of the surgical precision, and the date of the discovery matched the beginning of the school year. The University of Brussels argued though that it would be almost impossible for a whole body to just disappear without anybody noticing, so that wasn't a good lead. Imagine you could just walk in there, take a body, and nobody would notice. Wouldn't seem like a very safe university. Other people thought it might be the work of a psychopath serial killer that was active between 1996 and 1997, the so-called Butcher of Mons, where 5 women were found in garbage bags without the killer ever being identified. It got really crazy. Like, listen to this. The location of the victim was very close to the highest point of Brussels. Possibly a symbolic location since Kira acts as a god of death in the manga. That was out of the actual wiki of the case. Might as well just say that Kira got reincarnated into this world. On November 24th, the police announced that they reached a dead end on the 2-month-old case. And the media was low-key geeked. A murder that nobody could solve, referring to Death Note. And they just wouldn't find any conclusion to the case. Until 3 entire years later, around September of 2010, the police managed to arrest 4 suspects linked to this case. 3 people for the actual and one person for failing to provide assistance to a person in danger. It turns out that the deceased person actually lived with multiple of the at the time of the disappearance.
Multiple?
An argument broke out between them, and the victim refused to leave the apartment when asked, and so it turned physical. They supposedly beat the person until he passed and tried to dissolve the body in the drain cleaner. Some vile stuff. When they came back some days later, according to one of the killers, it stank and was bluish, so they cut the body into pieces. They tried to burn it, but eventually decided to scatter the remainings in the park. In June 2013, 2 of the 4 suspects were convicted and received sentences of 20 years.
People?
The third suspect was convicted to 23 years since she went on the run after appearing in court for only 1 day. You've got
Whose idea was it to
try to run from this
to
case.
do the Death
Now,
Note
the real
shit?
question is actually, why were there multiple notes saying I am Kira? Well, it turns out they were just really big fans of the manga and anime, and so they decided to leave them there. And they didn't even spell the sentence correctly. They wrote Watashi wa Kira desu, but it's supposed to be Watashi wa Kira desu. I'm no Japanese pro though, so I'm just repeating what my sources say.
Oh my god.
Generation is clearly lost.
'Chronically
2015,
Online guy.
Japan. Maya Tomita is 20 years old, studying business and pursuing her passion in the entertainment industry. She has already made a small name for herself by appearing in the TV drama Secret Girls, which was basically a show about these girls living a secret double life as a Japanese idol group. Kind of like
Hannah Montana?
Batman, but with more singing and less fighting crime, I think. But after
No,
doing
it's
a
like
few
Hannah
side
Montana.
gigs here and there, she decided to become an independent artist and musician. In order to gain popularity, since she was still pretty underground, she traveled to different restaurants and venues to play her songs. During these shows, she slowly builds up her following and meets a ton of new people, including Tomohiro Iwasaki. He's around 26 when he first discovers her. He is
Like
essentially
me.
the polar opposite of Tomita. Her professors describe Tomita as having this very bubbly personality and being very kind and outgoing in general. Iwasaki, on the other hand, has basically isolated himself for the past years.
I know this
He
story.
barely has
I don't
any
know this
friends
one.
or social interactions in general. He's like the role model of 4chan users. His brother described him as unskilled in expressing his emotions, but also a gentle and childlike soul. From the first time he saw her, Iwasaki really liked Tomita, and she wouldn't be the first person he would later become absolutely obsessed with. The thing is, Iwasaki had a history of stalking idols and documenting their every move on his blog, where he would share all his thoughts and feelings. And he was a very passionate individual. It would escalate to a point where multiple police reports would be filed against him for following idols in real life and sending them threats. But the
Holy
worst crime
shit!
would have yet to come. Like with all the other Japanese idols, Iwasaki quickly became infatuated with Tomita. He would start off as a passionate fan of her and her work, giving her chocolates and little gifts after her performances, which could still be seen as quite normal. I mean, fans give
Okay,
stuff
yeah,
to their
sure.
idols or role models all the time. But as time went on, he became more and more obsessed. In 2016, after giving her various gifts ranging from flowers to weird-ass books, he built up this fantasy that they're gonna become a thing somehow. I mean, he gave her so many cool things, right? So Iwasaki would decide to propose to her in the restaurant she would perform at that night.
Oh,
With
no.
his biggest gift yet, a very expensive gold
Oh,
watch,
no.
along with random books. So far, Tomita has been quite nice to him, accepting his gifts and all that, but she obviously couldn't marry this guy. They never even talked outside
Yeah,
of
she
her
doesn't know
performance,
him.
so she rejected him. But she gave him his Twitter so he could check out what she was doing more often, and somehow that seemed to satisfy Iwasaki.
No.
Although he was like
What a
very isolated
mistake.
from everyone essentially and seemed like the perfect guy to run a Discord server, he actually only used Ameba. I don't know how to
What is
pronounce it,
that?
to be honest. A Japanese social networking and blogging platform. So getting access to her Twitter seemed like something very intimate to him, although it definitely wasn't. And so he followed Tomita and a friend of hers, who also performed that night he proposed. Right away, this guy started tweeting like crazy. I'm talking dozens of tweets in a day. Also his idol and her friend. By now, Tomita was more than creeped out and knew that if she actually responded to him, she would only feed more into Iwasaki's fantasies. So she just straight up ignored him. Her friend though initially replied to Iwasaki, since she
What?
probably
Just
didn't
block
know
him.
that he literally attended almost every single one of Tomita's concerts and was just a creep in general. But even she stopped talking to him after a while, and being ignored for all that time kind of flipped a switch in him, which made his love for Mayu Tomita turn into hatred. He proceeded
Uh-oh.
to spam her Twitter with over 400
no.
messages telling her that she's looking down on him, that she's ungrateful, and he even threatened her life. In order to bring an end to all this, she decided to return the expensive watch he gave her and blocked him on Twitter at the end of April. That would be 12 days before the attack. On the 9th
Oh,
of May
God.
2016, Tomita decided to file a police report against him since she did not feel safe at all. The police didn't really do anything though, since it did not fall under Japan's stalking laws back in the day, and they didn't think that harassment on social media was a serious enough threat. Police really was on demon timing. They did not care at all. At this point, Iwasaki has gone absolutely mental. Because Tomita blocked him, he spam messaged her friends on Twitter, demanding all of the gifts back now. The chocolate, the weird
He wanted
books,
the chocolate
flowers,
back?
no, all of that back.
How's she gonna
Cody,
give the
how do you
chocolate
expect
back?
chocolate to be returned? But what can you actually
What?
expect from a guy like him? Even though this was a very stressful time for Tomita and all her loved ones, she had to keep it pushing. She was trying to make it as a singer after all. So on May 21st, she was set to perform at an event called Solid Girls Night Volume 11. She publicly announced that she would be there, so she was obviously
Oh,
kinda
no.
scared that Iwasaki might pull up, and her worst nightmare became a reality. Before she could even enter the venue, Iwasaki confronted Tomita and asked her why she returned all of the gifts. Tomita was obviously frightened as a
Oh, she did return them?
and gave a vague answer before trying to run away. When she turned around, Iwasaki stabbed her from behind in the chest and neck area 61 times with a 3.1-inch knife. He allegedly screamed, "You should die, die," while doing that. Eyewitnesses immediately called the police after hearing Tomita
Holy
scream for help
fuck.
and arrested Iwasaki. You can see in the pictures.
Yeah,
this
why
guy
was no one
doesn't
with
seem to feel
her?
any type of remorse
Poor
or shock
girl.
at all. This is a genuine psychopath, bro. Tomita was in critical condition, but God knows how, Iwasaki didn't manage to damage any vital organs.
Oh,
so she
shit.
managed to survive and regain consciousness on June 7th, 2016.
Oh, thank God.
She lived. Unfortunately,
Wow,
though,
she
her
lived.
dream of becoming a popular singer has been destroyed, since she had problems even talking or using her hands. She also suffered
Oh.
from PTSD, so
Yeah, of
imagine going
course.
on stage with that. The police later on issued an apology for not doing anything when she was literally begging for help, saying that they didn't know that the harassment was happening outside of social media as well. Iwasaki only received 14 years, but it actually led to Japan changing their anti-stalking laws to include online harassment on social media as well.
Well, that's
so there was
good.
at least something positive
Yeah,
coming out of
14's
this. Now,
like
this was an
nothing for
insane
trying to
case
kill
of obsession,
someone.
But this next case had even more casualties.
Our young generation is clearly lost.
Kyoto Animations is one of the greatest animation studios in Japan. It was the main publisher of a ton of insane animes, including K-On!, A Silent Voice, Free, and a bunch more. The company has multiple locations throughout
Oh,
Japan,
no.
but this story is about Studio One,
No.
the building actually dedicated to the animation side of things. It's 2018 and Kyoto Animation suddenly experiences an influx of hate messages. It starts off as threats and slander, but as time goes on, the messages develop into threats, even mentioning specific staff that are working for Kyoto Animation. This whole thing escalates to the point that in October of 2018, the company went to the police to investigate. The Kyoto police tried to find out who was behind these, at this point, hundreds of death threats, but couldn't pinpoint any person.
Man,
as the
maybe
creator
anime
used
fans
Tor to
are a
hide their
problem.
information, kind of like the dark web type of alley. And so the police just kind of gave up. I mean, they're just empty threats after all, right? This would be the potential foreshadowing to one of the most tragic things happening in the anime industry ever. Shinji Aoba, 41 at the time, was staying at an internet cafe on July 16. According to eyewitnesses, he was seen walking around the area close to the animation studio, kind of just cooking up his plan, I guess. 2 days later, on
What,
the
the
morning
fanny
of
pack?
July the 18th, Aoba walks into the studio, carrying 11 gallons of gasoline. He basically soaks the entire area, including several employees, before igniting it. He sets multiple employees on including him during the process. Right away, the fire
What
resulted in
anime
an
was he
explosion at
so
around
mad about?
10:31 a.m. due to the gasoline mixing with the air or something.
I
I'm
guess
not a
maybe-
chemist.
did
And
they ever
Aoba
say her-
supposedly screams "die" repeatedly as he carries out his act. The fire
Yeah,
grows
maybe
by
they
the
did-
entrance.
wait,
as
fire
Aoba
force?
just walked in there, and it traps the entire staff inside the building. Some workers try to escape through the second and third floors, but the explosion caused the floors to be filled with smoke within 30 seconds, making escape almost impossible. 5 hours later, and the fire is under control, but it's only extinguished the next day at 6
said
a.m.
they
The
stole
building
his
had no
ideas?
fire sprinklers
Oh.
or anything due to it being classified as a small office building.
It's
which
a
is
joke?
crazy to
Oh.
think about. Now, before I talk about
I
the
assume 'cause
aftermath
two people in
of
a row
this, which is
posted it.
absolutely insane, why did Shinji Aoba do all
Such
this?
a bad
Did he not like
joke,
the anime they
dude.
produced? Was he just batshit
bad.
crazy? Well, as I already said, he lit himself on too during the process, so he had to be rushed to the hospital with severe burns. While being transported
Jeez.
there, he admitted to having started the fire, and he actually admitted doing it because of plagiarism. You heard me right? because of plagiarism. He accused the studio of stealing ideas from his novel. Aoba had submitted a draft novel to the studio, but it didn't even pass the first stage of assessment and was forgotten. But he was still convinced that they stole stuff from his work. Now let me just read out the scenes that were supposedly stolen.
Shit.
His main accusation was that in the anime Tsurune, there's a character in episode 5 who buys meat at a 20% discount. And his novel also happened to have a scene where the hero buys something at a 50% discount. That's it. Now there are also some other scenes that were supposedly stolen. So in the anime 3, right? There's a scene where a school banner reads "Swimming Club advanced to regional tournament." Aoba's novel apparently included a few scenes where banners appear too. This guy's not serious. And the last one is where a character in K-On! Says to a junior, "I repeated a grade." And in Aoba's story there's a scene where a high school boy is told by his teacher, "If you continue like this, you'll repeat the grade." Those were all the scenes that were apparently plagiarized.
I mean, people, there's like a lot of crazy people. Like, wasn't there a chick like that who, for, I think it was Harry Potter or maybe Twilight, she accused the author of stealing it because like they had a dream that had similar stuff in it or something? Oh my god.
Like they happen to have the exact same concepts.
They tried to sue them. Yeah, I think it was Twilight.
Characters. They happen to have similar scenes.
I don't remember which series it
was. The amount of times an anime girl punches a guy in the face, animation studios would be accused of plagiarism all the time. So let's talk about the disaster he actually created. 70 people were inside the studio at the time of the fire. 36 employees, most of them almost instantly because of the severe burns, and some of them because of the carbon monoxide a couple days later. Among some of the deceased were Naomi Ishida, a color designer who has worked for the company since 1992. She was the first victim who was identified as. Also Yasuhiro Takemoto, who was an animator, scriptwriter, and director in the fire. He's worked at Kyoto Animation for almost his entire career. And Yoshiji Kigami, a giant in the industry, a veteran who has worked on films like Akira and Studio Ghibli's Grave of the Fireflies.
Oh wow.
The world of anime and Japan lost so many important people that day because of this man. This event was one of the deadliest massacres in Japan since the end of World War II. Now Aoba was transferred to a university hospital and he received all the necessary surgery
meat at the
to
grocery
survive.
store
After
in an anime.
4 months of recovery, he was able to talk and wasn't in critical condition anymore. He got artificial skin and the whole package. After recovering, he said that he regretted his actions and was thankful for the staff, who treated him better than anyone has ever before. Could have thought about that before doing that, big bro.
What? That is insane!
Attempted and a bunch of other things. And it
Why would
turns
you
out
even
the
say
novel might have
that?
just set off this behavior, but wasn't actually the cause of it, since Aoba had a prior criminal history and suffered from mental illness. In 2012, for example, he robbed a convenience store with a knife.
No
and was
shit.
jailed for 3.5 years. And he did that just because, I guess. This whole court thing takes quite a while, but in January of 2024, he was finally sentenced, and he received the death penalty, which he accepted. Pretty crazy if you think about it. They saved his life and proceeded to do surgery on him for months just to give him the death sentence. But I digress. After the attack, some of the employees who were involved in this tragedy returned to work at the other location of Kyoto Animation. But obviously some of them took extended breaks to deal with the stress and trauma, and the building was demolished.
Our young generation is clearly lost.
Delusional
It's 4
queen.
p.m.
Okay.
The police in Tokyo receive a call that a man has been. Once they arrive at the scene, they find a person seated on the floor. It's an attractive young woman.
Wait, I know
sitting
this
in the lobby
story.
of her building, but her legs and hands are covered in blood. She's sitting next to the man who's slowly out, literally just chilling with a phone in her hand. That woman was Yuka Takaoka. When all of this happened, Takaoka was a manager at a hostess club. A hostess club is basically a place Japanese men go to get their ego stroked. They go in, the girls working there pretend like they're the king of the world and make them buy drinks and spend money. There's also some spicy stuff going on behind the scenes, but most of the time it's really just talking and drinking. Imagine feeling like Justin Bieber in his prime, but you just pay for that feeling instead. Takaoka's job was kind of just overseeing the place and trying to milk out as much money out of these men as possible. Now on the side, Takaoka was also a huge anime fan. Who would have thought? Whole videos about otakus. She would do the typical thing of cosplaying characters and stuff like that. Nothing out of the ordinary. There was one type of character though, she seemed to cosplay the most. Yanderes. If you're chronically online, you know what those are, but if not, yanderes are basically these girls in animes, or I guess also in real life, who are overly in love with somebody. Like that next level stuff. Anybody who gets near their crush gets stabbed and they become all crazy. That's like
I've only cosplayed like 2 yandere characters.
You're this girl who
That's not
everybody
like me.
and anything who stands in the way of your love. Now let's get back to the hostess club. Those are designed for Japanese men to talk to women, but there's also the female counterpart, host clubs. Women go there to just forget about reality and talk to young men. And in one of those host clubs, Phoenix Luna had just started working there as a host to make a living. It's obviously not his real name though. Even though he just started out, he actually managed to do pretty decently as a host. He was number 4 and for quite some time number 3 in terms of popularity, which didn't result in a lot of money, but it was enough to survive, since he was also able to sleep there. He just kinda had that nice look to him. I mean, he's not an ugly guy, no did he? So one night, Yuka Takaoka decided that work was pretty draining as a manager. So she just wanted to relax a little and get some male attention. And so she went to a fusion nightclub, the host club where Luna worked at. Now it was just something about this guy that caught Takaoka's attention. And so she chose him to entertain her for the night. She spends some money, has a pleasant night, and then goes home. As transactional as it gets basically. It's like somebody subbing to a big streamer. They get $5 and you get to see your name on the screen for a split second. But Takaoka just keeps thinking about this man, so she decides to return to the club over and over again. You gotta know, for the past years, Takaoka has only been focusing on stacking her bread. So she has
anyone got a sub or
just kidding. So she goes in there and buys champagne after champagne, and the person who kind of makes her buy those drinks,
yo, cut up Queen 666, thanks for the prime. Yo, what's up?
About making more money. After a while, Takaoka notices that Luna is only ranked 4 on the leaderboard, and so she decides to spend even more money
Mr.
on
Fox
it to get him up those ranks.
Thanks for 29
and I'm not talking about a few $100s here and there. She spent up to $10K a month on Luna, which got him to rank 1 on the leaderboard within a month. They spent so much time together.
Dang, she was an oiler!
That if she just keeps spending money on him, he would eventually be able to quit his job and they could be a couple. Some down bad fantasy right there. This delusion escalated to a point where she would pay him to go on dates with her and paid extra money so she could reserve him every time she visited the club. Now Luna obviously kind of plays along since he's making decent money at this point, and it's kind of the job of somebody working there to be like a pretend boyfriend. And Takaoka would kind of know that since she literally works in the industry herself. But I guess if you got those pink glasses on, you can't be stopped. She proceeded to rent a whole apartment near Luna's club so they can move in together. And I guess Luna kind of agreed to live there a part-time. This is the part where she actually turns full
Yo, Wasabi, thanks for the 10 gifted.
She gets so jealous of his work that she tells him that every time he meets a woman who's paying for his services, if you know what I mean, he should call and tell her. Remember, this man is not in a relationship with Takaoka at all. She's just paying him to pretend. Imagine a
why did he actually move in with her,
that she can't get in a relationship because he's her biggest fan.
Ain't funny.
But Luna kind of plays along because he's a sweet guy, and so he agrees to do so. On May 23rd, 2019, Luna calls Takaoka and tells her, hey, I'm meeting with another woman, strictly business, you know what I'm saying? Just wanted to let you know, even though this is literally the exact thing she told him to do, Takaoka goes mad. So mad that she makes up a plan to self-exit. But she's also
maybe she thought that he wouldn't do it. She got so delusional. She's like, oh, well, he loves me. He's gonna be like, oh, I don't want to see other women because you pay for me or whatever.
If she's going to, might as well take
I mean, she's
him with
crazy,
so they can be happy in the afterlife.
But he's just doing his
Romeo
job.
and Juliet type of story. All this time, Luna obviously said, I love you and stuff like that to her, but even she knew that he just did that because he got paid to do so.
Yeah,
and in her
that's
head,
literally
if they
his
both
job.
passed, his statements might become a reality. So she pretends like she didn't just come up with the most twisted, evil plan ever and tells him to go over to their apartment so he can help her clean the place. After they do that, and also for some change, he takes a bath to just kind of unwind and relax. While he's taking a snap, Takaoka decides to snoop through his phone and finds pictures of another woman at the nightclub with him. Those weren't even explicit or anything, just photos that align with his work, right? Luna steps out of the tub to go to sleep in the actual bed of the apartment, and it's all good. That night, Takaoka waits until about 3:50 a.m. to ensure he's really asleep. She takes out a knife and stabs him in his stomach. He obviously instantly wakes up, shocked that he literally has something in his body, and before being able to push her away, Takaoka sits on top of him, asking him if he really liked her. I think in this situation, every guy would do the same thing, and he just tells her, I love you, and then pushes her to the side. He runs towards the elevator to
Jesus, I didn't know this part of the story.
And Takaoka follows him after grabbing some things. Luna loses consciousness though, and so Takaoka literally drags his body to the lobby of their residence and just sits next to him, waiting for him to die. Now a random woman just walks by and sees all of this and is shocked to her core. First thing you gotta do is obviously take a picture, and then she calls the police. In the picture you can see Takaoka on her phone, talking to God knows who, without a care in the world. Nobody does anything to stop her though, since they don't know what she's actually capable of. I mean, I would definitely not go near a girl sitting next to a grown man who slowly acting like everything is sunshine and rainbows. And that brings us back to the beginning. Police arrive and arrest her, and she actually doesn't put up any sort of fight. While she's in the police car, you can literally see her smiling, like she enjoyed that stuff.
That's
now
a
comes
creepy
probably
picture.
The most obscure thing ever. Following this attack, Takaoka basically builds a huge following because she's somewhat attractive. Like, what? It's like the guy who ran over who ended up getting like edits made of him. She got fan art. People described her as too beautiful to be criminal and all of that. In December of 2019,
This shit's so cringe and disgusting.
She got 3.5 years in prison for attempted. Only 3 years for all of
3.5
that.
years?
The good side
And we
is
were saying
Luna
the guy that
was
got
able to
15
recover
was
from his
bad,
head
or was it
injuries.
14?
He regained consciousness 5 days after the attack.
That's
even though the doctor
insane!
said that he only had a 20% chance of surviving. But obviously he wasn't able to talk, eat, walk, or do anything essentially for quite some time.
Man.
But after recovering from all that, as far as I know, he actually came back to the industry. He still works in the same
went
host
back
role,
to
but
being
it's
a host?
way more popular now since everybody knows the story. The one downside is that his liver doesn't work anymore, and so he can't drink alcohol, but he can probably live with that. And this guy's some kind of saint. Luna agreed to do an interview with some reporters, right? And he literally said that
Damn.
he fully forgives her for what she did. This guy's like an angel.
Oh, wow.
Now let's talk about Takaoka. This all happened in 2019 and she got 3 years. Doing some
Okay.
basic maths and she's been out there.
That guy's
and
cool as
she actually
fuck.
posts quite regularly on her Instagram, still doing cosplays and stuff like that. And she also streamed, like Pokemon and stuff.
Our young generation is clearly lost, man.
Junji
Dude. That's insane. That's insane. Collaborate her? Nah, I mean, I don't know if that's a good idea, guys. I don't think that's a very good idea. She doesn't, you know, I mean, the guy forgave her, but I don't think that's a good idea.
Matsumoto was born in 1962 in, who'd have guessed, Japan. You could describe him as a typical introvert kind of nerd.
What if she does a submission for the cosplay contest? I mean, oh man, I thought you support women. I don't support women stabbing people, okay? I also don't support men stabbing people. I know that's crazy. Jackass. Oh, woman hater. You know what? You know what? You're right.
Was
You're
born
right.
in 1962 in, who'd have guessed, Japan. You could describe him as a typical introvert kind of nerd type of guy. He didn't really talk much, and when somebody asked him something in class, he would just straight up not respond or go to the bathroom as an excuse. He really was just in his own world for real. For example, one time in class, he was asked what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he just didn't say a word, probably just stared at the teacher. Later, when the classmate asked him in private what he wanted to do, he said he wanted to be a scientist, since he was pretty good at math and science. So he
That's
might have been a shy
respectable.
kid, but he at least had something going for him. He could focus on becoming a scientist and just live a normal life. Unfortunately, he would experience an episode of events that will lead him to kill both of his parents. After graduating high school, he secured a job for a little bit, but quit since he couldn't adjust to the workplace, probably because of his shyness or anxiety, and he just kind of stopped looking for jobs. Instead, he now spends most of his time watching anime, reading manga, and helping out at the liquor store that his mother runs, alongside his big bro. He has no sort of friends, and his family are really the only people he actually talks to. It's safe to say he doesn't really have any plan on what to do with his life, and he continues this exact lifestyle for 30 years.
30
years
Jesus.
of watching anime, reading manga, and sometimes helping out at the store. And now comes the first unlucky event. His brother is hospitalized because of some sort of illness, which leaves Junji's mom and Junji to run the store now. But things just don't really work out after a while. Other corporations around the area slowly open up stores, Junji can't really operate things, and the parents are quite old now, so they decide to close the shop and retire. I mean, he's around 49 when this happens, so his parents are getting up there as well. Respect to the grind, but at one point you gotta hang it up, right? So they're both retired now, and his dad kinda runs the household since his wife is not physically able to do so. Here comes the second unfortunate event. On June 13th, 2021, Hirokazu, the dad, who's now in his 80s, just rides his bike when he gets into an accident. And you know how quickly older people can break bones and stuff. I mean, it's pretty crazy that he's even able to ride a bike at that age. But the father ends up being wheelchair bound nonetheless. With his brother hospitalized for 10 years now, and his dad being in a wheelchair, it is now fully Junji's responsibility to take care of his parents and the household. And he's
that's
overwhelmed.
a lot of
he suddenly has to
responsibility.
tend to them 24/7. Every time they gotta go to the toilet, he has to help them. When they need to take a shower, he's gotta help them. And something like a retirement home is out of the question, since they do not have the funds to support that at all. Matter of fact, he uses the money that they saved up over the decades to buy the food and all that, since he hasn't had a job that actually paid him since he was 19. It really seems like a dead end.
Oh,
now let's
man.
talk about the most unfortunate event. On June 20th, 2021, Junji was just watching his favorite anime. Probably like, my little sister can't be this cute. Enough with the jokes. This is really sad. He watches this anime to kind of escape
Jokes?
reality
What?
for a
What
bit.
did he say?
And his father asks him to help him to the toilet, as usual. But there's a really good scene happening right now, so Junji just tries to ignore him. His father really needs to go though, so he's kind of complaining and annoying him, if you can put it like that. He asks him over and over again, until Junji snaps. He's so fed up with his father that he grabs an electrical cord and just starts him. His dad kind of squirms around and tries to stop it, but Junji continues. And all that is left now is his father's soulless. Junji doesn't just live with his father though, right? His mother witnessed everything as well. So in his head,
She
he needs to
watched?
get rid of her too. He's now left with two in front of him. He grabs them and puts them into the big ass empty fridge that used to be part of the liquor store. He shoves them in there and just tapes the door shut. Jesus Christ, bro, this stuff is disturbing. After the adrenaline probably kind of wears off, he realizes that he had just become a criminal.
So did
even
he
though
go
just
back
wanted
to
watch
watching
his
anime, or?
He does not want to go to jail though, probably because he wouldn't be able to watch his anime. So he devises a plan to escape. After the incident, he calls off all appointments that his parents had. He calls off the rehab for his mother, and he postpones the visit of the welfare guys who would have come to the home to check up on them. On June 23rd, he takes all the credit cards of his parents and withdraws everything he can out of there, and then he leaves. There's a mix of him riding his bike and taking trains, but he essentially travels from one side of Japan to the other side, sleeping in different hotels, motels, whatever he could probably find. While he's gone, his relatives actually try calling them multiple times, but obviously nobody picks up, and so after a while of calling them, they call the police instead for a wellness check. They knew that Junji was under a lot of pressure and was kind of, closed off, not really the guy to talk and stuff. So on June 28th, the police checks up on them. Upon entering the house, they notice this weird stench coming from the fridge, and when they open it, they find this. This is a 3D model of how the were inside the fridge. Damn. So they find both of the parents, but they don't know where the last person
Yeah, he
is.
just dumped
Junji.
them in
I mean,
there.
in their heads, everything could have happened to him. He might have been kidnapped, or also met the same fate as the parents. So they ask around. They interview the neighbors and stuff like that, and they all tell them Junji was kind of acting weird lately, and somebody spotted him riding his bike, and that leads to a nationwide search for him. The police looks at security camera footage, they ask hotels and all of that, and through that, they actually managed to track him down pretty easily. On July 4th, 2021, they find him in a hotel parking lot in Kyoto. They first arrest him for leaving corpses without reporting it or something, which you obviously should do, but he quickly admits that he was actually the one who them. And not gonna lie, this next part is just really depressing. During his trial, the prosecutor asks him about his family, and he basically describes how his mother suffered from a lumbar fracture. I don't know what that's either, but her back probably hurt so much that she said she didn't want to live anymore. And his father developed dementia in early 2021, and when he asked Junji to help him use the toilet, all that pent-up frustration and pressure just exploded, and he didn't care about the repercussions of his actions. During that trial, there were also talks about him having a personality disorder, which made him so shy and isolated from everybody, but that didn't really change the result of the sentence. On the 6th of I don't know, to be honest, because the article doesn't say what 6th, but I'm guessing on the 6th of July, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for alongside some other things.
Can't watch anime in jail.
Tsutomu Miyazaki started off like almost every single person on this list. He was born in 1962 in Japan, and during his childhood he kept to himself a lot. He was bullied in school and didn't have a lot of friends, or any friends. And the reason for that is actually because of something entirely out of his control. He had a hand deformity which made his hand appear claw-like. I couldn't find a real close-up of his actual hand, since a lot of people use this picture, which doesn't even have anything to do with this case, but you can kind of see his hand right here. Because he was
What?
kind of an
It's not even that
outcast, he
bad.
spent a lot of time reading manga
Yo,
and
Sari,
watching
thanks for the
anime.
5
And
gifted.
like a lot
Thank
of
you.
pubescent teenagers, he also dabbled in spicy content and horror movies as well. But as time went on, he gradually started watching
Classic,
more
I
violent and
guess.
graphic stuff. But I'll get there. Now, although Tsutomu was kind of a loner, from the outside it actually looked like his life was pretty nice. He was born into a wealthy family. They ran a newspaper business and they were actually quite well known in the area. Additionally, he was a straight A student. He attended a very prestigious high school and was basically a 5-star recruit, but for academics basically. He wanted to study English to become a teacher. Pretty wholesome so far. But of course the outside often does not reflect the inside. People flex designer stuff even though they're dead broke. And Tsutomu felt the same way, dead inside. His parents were always working. They put so much pressure on him to perform well in school. He still had no friends, and the only person he actually talked to was his grandfather, who was basically raising him. And all that just accumulates over time. You can tell that he started to show cracks when his grades dropped. And they dropped
Oh,
dramatically.
no.
He went from a rising star to rank 40 out of 56, which is pretty bad if you can't tell. Now, the high school he attended was connected to a university, so if you do well enough, you can just kind of transition and study the thing you want to study. In his case, English, right? But his grades dropped so low that he couldn't get in, so he had to attend a
no.
random local college instead, and decided to become a photography technician out of nowhere. And you really gotta remember these small details, because once I reach the end, all these little facts will have such a compounding
God.
effect. Tsutomu studied
Okay.
photography or whatever,
So he's
and
becoming a
during this
photographer
time, his
now?
obsession with weird media started growing. Apparently in college, he would take not so appropriate photos of female players on the tennis court and be an absolute fiend for spicy magazines. But according to him,
Okay,
they
he was
became
a
boring after
creep.
a while,
They
since
became
they blacked out
boring.
the most important part. So he would go down the
Okay.
route of seeking more extreme stuff, such as media including people not of age. He really fell into the depths of full-fledged degeneracy.
Okay.
And this is only the beginning. At home, he still felt like nobody in his family really cared about his happiness or anything. They
Yeah,
were
he's
only
a fucking
focused on
freak.
material things and the business, which actually drove him to be quite depressed. And during that time, in the mid-1980s, so when he was in his 20s, he actually considered self-exiting. His grandfather managed to talk him out of that though. Unfortunately, in 1988, his grandfather would pass away. His only source of sincere human connection was gone now. The worst thing that could ever happen to him during this period happened. Simultaneously, his grandfather was probably the only one who kept Tsutomu's dark thoughts in check, so he had no person who would regulate him now. And considering that regulated means taking pictures of women, you can kinda guess where this leads.
Yeah,
His
that's
change of
him
personality
being
was
mentally
noticeable
stable.
from the get-go. He began spying on his
Or
little
at the
sisters
closest he
and
can be
attacked them when
anyway.
they confronted him. When his mother caught wind of it, she also said that he should watch less of his videotapes, that at this point contained increasingly more vile and graphic
Son, you should stop watching it.
stuff. Like the anime and horror tapes definitely were not the mainstream type, let's put it this way. He wasn't watching My Neighbor Totoro, okay? And in order to feel closer to his grandpa, that he understandably very much missed, he would also eat some of his ashes. But as crazy as it sounds, the worst has yet to come.
What?
It's August 22nd, 1988, and Mari Kono, who's 4 at the time, is just playing at a friend's house, and Tsutomu takes notice of this girl. I would really love to say that he just went on with his day and all is good, but instead he decides to lure her in his black Nissan, and he drives off with Mari. He drives for a while and eventually parks the car under a bridge. For 30 minutes they just sit in the car and do nothing, until he decides to murder her, and does some unspeakable things after. When he's done, he dumps the near his house and lets it decompose, before keeping some parts as a trophy in his apartment. He then decides to send a
what?
box to Mari's family, including
What
several
the
teeth,
fuck?
grounded bones, and photos of clothing. And I think you can imagine who they belong to. This
Yeah, maybe we
absolute
should just
psychopath
watch
also
the
sends
cat
a postcard
videos.
that reads, Mari, bones, cremated, investigate, proof. This happens a total of 4 times. October 3rd,
Dude, I know he
1988.
was like giving like, oh, like this is, dude, this, you know, like the joke that they say like, oh, like guys will be mean to their girlfriend or cheat on them, and be like, oh, it's because my grandma died 5 years ago. This guy's grandpa died and he murders a child. Like, why was that even part of the story?
Tsutomu
Like,
spots
what?
Masami Yoshizawa, who's 7 at the time. He offers Masami a ride, which she unfortunately accepts. He drives to the same place that he brought Mari to, and
Wait,
he
4
does
of
the
them?
same unspeakable things to her, takes her clothes, and returns home. December 12th, 1988. Erika Namba plans to return home from a friend's house when Tsutomu kidnaps her. He her into his car and drives to a parking lot. and takes pictures of her, of the inappropriate kind. Her was found 3 days later, close to the parking lot. On December
Dude, this is
20,
why a lot of
Mama's
people don't
family
like
also
weebs.
receive a postcard that reads, Erica, cold, cough, throat, rest, death. June 6, 1989. It's been almost an entire year now since his first victim, and he still has not been caught yet. Ayako Nomoto, age 5, is again just playing in the park when Tsutomu asks to take pictures of her. After doing so, because Ayako obviously doesn't think anything of it, she's 5 goddammit, he convinces her to get into his car where they could continue taking pictures. And again, he murders her. He does not let her rest though. He keeps her body in his apartment for the next 2 days and does unspeakable things until it starts to decompose. He also
This is
drinks
so
her
bad.
and eats parts of her. To make it even harder for all of the families of the victims, he would keep sending postcards describing what he did to them in detail.
I mean,
Even
surely
call
this
them
guy got the
regularly.
death
When
penalty,
the families
right?
would pick up, they would just hear him breathing through the phone, not a single word being said. July 23rd, 1989, Tsutomu sees 2 sisters playing in a park, and he convinces the younger sister to go with him. Again, he starts taking pictures. But before this horrible cycle of suffering is able to continue, her father steps in and attacks Tsutomu. Luckily, her older sister who stayed behind ran to her dad to tell him what happened. Tsutomu was able to escape, but leaves his car behind. When he eventually returns, thinking that he's safe, he's finally arrested by the police, who waited there the entire time.
I bet that dad's
But
so
that's
glad
not
that
the
he
end.
was there. Oh
Just
my
yet.
god.
When the police enter his
He has to be
apartment,
so
they
glad.
find a total
That's so
of
crazy.
5,763 videotapes, some containing anime, some containing horror movies, and some containing footage of his victims. Like the entire room was just filled with tapes. On March 30th, 1990, pretty much all of Japan knew who this man was, and it was a huge thing on the news. His dad, who apparently didn't know any of this beforehand, didn't bother to pay any kind of attorney to represent him, and his whole family obviously disowned him. During the trial, Tsutomu
why
would
the
really
fuck would
just
you?
He blamed his alter ego for all the... He called him the Rat Man. This is a picture he drew to describe him. Bro really just copied the Chuck E.
The rat man. Oh.
Cheese costume. The thing is, under Japanese law, people who are in the state of like insanity where they commit their crimes aren't punished in the sense of going to prison. Instead, they would be sent to a medical facility or something similar.
No.
So it was really just a question of, was he actually insane or just pretending to be to get his sentence reduced? During the interrogation, he talked about how the rat man was always standing next to him, and before he killed one of the victims, 10 rat men would just appear, and once they were gone, the victim was dead. Like really just trying to seem like he was insane, which he obviously was to a degree, but he was definitely also fully aware of what he did. There were 3 teams of expert psychiatrists analyzing him, I guess, and they all came to different conclusions. One deemed him as schizophrenic, the other team said that he had multiple personality disorder, and the third team said that he might have had a personality disorder, but was still capable of his actions, making him fully responsible. And the court ended up deciding in favor of the last team, and so on April 14th, 1997, he was sentenced to death, but he was actually hanged in 2008. That was something, man.
What is this vid? No! Dude, what a... Jesus, what a video. I thought that was gonna be just like weird con stories or something. That was fucking brutal, Jesus. Oh, God.